You ever see a man swallowed whole by a curtain? I have. We thought the manor was abandoned, dust on the floor, moonlight creeping through the broken windows. Then the fireplace, it roared to life, and the shadows started moving. Raylor went first. He was laughing 1 second, but choking the next, wrapped up in some damned velvet drapes that twisted like a snake. I tried to cut him free. I reached for the knives in the drawer, but the knives from the kitchen, they were already in the air. They danced through the dark, faster than a swordsman's hand, cut Jory to ribbons before he could even scream. And the armor stepped forward, empty, clanking, dragging its rusted greatsword behind it, and the broom, God's the broom. It wasn't just sweeping anymore. I ran. What else could I do? You ever try fighting a house that wants you dead? If you ever hear a whisper when the wind ain't blowing, if a door creaks when nobody's near it, if you feel like something's watching but you see nothing at all, turn back. Because some things, some places, they shouldn't be alive. Animated objects. You think they're harmless, just tools, furniture, decorations, but in the right hands, or the wrong magic, they can be some of the deadliest enemies in D&D. Let's break down how they work, and more importantly, how you can use them to terrify your players. Welcome to the Monster Spotlight for Animated Objects. We're going to be breaking down all of the creatures that will haunt your players' dreams and challenge their strategies. Today we're diving into a unique threat, animated objects. Whether conjured by magic or possessed by... The earliest use of these types of creatures actually is from the very beginning of D&D. The very first set include the Animate Object spell, which allowed spellcasters to imbue objects with motion and attacks. Then, as we've seen D&D just expand over time, there have been supplements, which has introduced more monsters like the animated statue and different constructs. And now, in 2024, we have a new concept of them in the Monster Manual. There's 4 different variants, and then I'm going to expand on those near the end and just talk about how you can use animated objects in your campaign. So, animated objects are constructs brought to life through magic, spirits, or even just sheer odd happenstance. They come in all shapes and sizes: suits of armor, brooms, flying swords, and even rugs. While each type moves and attacks differently, they all share some key traits like following simple commands and not really thinking for themselves, and are immune to many common forms of damage like poison and psychic effects. These creatures are often found in places filled with magical energy, like wizards' towers, or ancient crypts, arcane laboratories, and cursed mansions. They can also serve as guardians in temples or noble estates, or even be remnants of forgotten enchantments, carrying out their last orders long after their masters have perished. They tend to use just brute force, having some high stats like the animated armor with an AC of 18, and the ability to make multiple attacks per turn. There can be a durable frontline attacker soaking up damage, but then also some of them rely on speed and mobility. The flying sword and the animated broom take advantage of aerial movement. And then they also tend to just use surprise and restraint, like the Rug of Smothering being the deadliest in the bunch, capable of grappling and suffocating a target. But all of these rely on that element of surprise to catch your party off guard. When they're just exploring a space and trying to understand what's in the room, little do they know the room itself is about to turn on them. For Dungeon Masters, animated objects offer a lot of flexibility. And so I'm going to give a couple of tips on how to use them well, and then I'm going to go into each of those stat blocks. I'm going to walk through some of those unique abilities. 1, lean into horror. Objects moving on their own can create a chilling atmosphere, so describe the subtle ways that objects coming back to life is actually a terrifying reality. A book might be flipping its own pages. A sword just starts shivering in its scabbard. Make use of the environment. Have animated furniture or decor interact with the players. A chandelier might actually be the animated object that falls and attacks, or a mirror that one of the players is looking into might distort their reflection before launching forward. Lastly, stack the odds. Animated objects are at their best when they're used in numbers. A single animated armor might not pose that much of a threat, but a room full of flying weapons, slamming doors, and rolling barrels, that's a completely different story. Just having the door be animated, shutting and locking behind them, and when somebody tries to get away from these newly animated threats, the door opens and slams them right in the face. What a moment. What a terrifying reality as it then closes back and locks itself. Use those types of strategies to really play up what this animated object monster is supposed to be. Let's jump into those stat blocks now. First, animated armor. So it has an armor class of 18 and hit points of 33. So one of our more formidable parts of these animated objects, we'll see that its strength score is the one it boasts in, but only with a +2, a +0 to dex, +1 to con, and then high negatives for intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So this is just a very brute creature, simply just trying to surprise and then slam, and that's just about it. Using those multi-attacks to get 2 slam attacks with a +4 to hit, and then 1d6 +2.
pretty threatening to a low-level party. A low-level party is going to struggle to hit an armor class of 18, so I would say do not under-assume the threat that the animated armor would have, but also know that it's not going to deal that much damage either. So if you are just going to be throwing animated objects at your party, and you have an animated armor in them and they're low level, just do the one armor and everything else is more of a distraction as they need to defeat that armor. It's going to be really hard to hit and they're going to try to focus that thing down. Next, we're going to look at the animated broom. The broom has an armor class of 15 and an HP of 14, so this one will die a good bit quicker than the armor. For its stats, it really just gets the +3 in dexterity, and then again, significantly low on those intelligence, wisdom, and charisma stats. It has this trait called Fly By, where it doesn't provoke an opportunity attack when it flies out of an enemy's reach, which is something you're really going to want to make sure you use, given that its speed is a 50-foot fly speed. Just have it flying by, making its slam attack, and then getting up and out of the way. Its slam attack is a +5 to hit and only a 1d4 +3 bludgeoning damage. So your goal is going to try to get those flybys as much as possible. And this thing is just an annoyance. It's coming in, it's smacking somebody in the face. Maybe it's sweeping out from under their legs, pun intended, and just causing distractions and havoc within the fight. But it will die quickly and it will not do that much damage on its own. So plan your combat accordingly. Next, we have the animated flying sword. We're going to see a little bit of a higher armor class, but the same amount of hit points as the broom. AC of 17 and HP of 14. A strength +1 and a dex +2, and again, those same negatives on the other side of the stat block. With that, the only action it has is its slash attack with a +4 to hit and dealing an average of 6 damage for 1d8 +2. What I think we should be noticing at this time is, other than the armor being really hard to kill for a low-level party, none of these objects on their own is that big of a threat. So you should be planning an entire experience around this, where we're maybe looking at that one piece of armor, but I would throw 5, 6, maybe even 7 animated objects at my party in addition to that armor in different waves. And so it might start with one sword and one armor, but then after they start to do a good deal of damage and get situated in that fight, then a couple of the brooms or objects or furniture pieces in the room start to then join into the fight, where they didn't even think that this was a bigger encounter, and then they turn around and there's a chair flying at them. Doing this in a way that has multi-dimensions to this fight, because 1 or 2 of these pieces on their own is not that much. Lastly, we're going to look at, I think, one of the more creative ones for us to use, the animated rug of smothering. So we see an armor class of 12 and an HP of 27. So very easy to hit. A little bit more health. We'll see this maybe take 2, 3, possibly 4 hits to kill, depending on the party's comp and what they're working with here. But we also see some good positive strengths here. Strength +3, dexterity +2. And the reason we have those is because of its smother action. We're going to see that's going to rely on some of those stats, because its smother action is a little bit more dynamic than just a swing and a hit. So for the smother action, it's a melee attack roll +5, and then an average of 10 damage for that 2d6 +3. If the target is a medium or smaller creature, the rug can give it the grappled condition with an escape DC of 13 instead of dealing damage. And until the grapple ends, the target has the blinded and restrained condition and is suffocating. And then it will take an average of 10, 2d6 +3 bludgeoning damage at the start of each of its turn, as the rug continues to smother only one creature at a time. While grappling the target, the rug cannot take this action. The rug halves the damage it takes, and the target takes the same amount of damage. So, this is where things can get really interesting. Your rug surprises somebody, giving them advantage on that smother roll, hopefully then smothering and getting to grapple and blind and restrain that one target. And then as the party is attacking that rug, trying to free their ally from suffocating, that ally is going to take half of the damage the rug does. So that is going to add a very interesting dynamic to that combat, where maybe you do have that one piece of armor that is coming in, getting ready to make multi-attacks, hard to hit, but one of the allies on the other side of the room smothered in this rug and suffocating. Your party then has that option of, oh man, do we fight this threat that's coming over towards us, or do we go and try to rescue our friend? And as that splits the party in the middle of that combat, then you get to throw in some of those other objects as soon as they feel like they've got it situated, and a couple of them run over to the rug and a couple of them run over to the armor. Then that third dimension of combat comes in. That is going to be memorable and terrifying if you play that up well. So, with those stat blocks in mind, imagine this. Imagine your party arriving at an old wizard's estate, and they're searching for a long-lost spell book, in need of that for some type of expansion for the wizard to just get more powerful, or maybe another NPC needs it because it has some really important information inside, and they step into the grand study, where the furniture is pristine, yet unnervingly still. The moment someone reaches for the book, the rug snaps up and ensnares them. The bookshelf begins launching tomes like missiles, while a pair of animated swords leap from their mounts, and the battle is on. That type of setting is like quintessential D&D to be able to throw in these animated objects. I want to talk about reskinning some of these objects though before we close. One of the best things about animated objects is that they're super versatile. Like I've mentioned in a couple different examples throughout this video, their stats are simple but effective, meaning you can easily reskin them into different settings and themes without changing their mechanics. And so I want to show a couple different creative ways to adapt them for your campaign. For example, the animated armor. You could use the animated armor as haunted mannequins or possessed statues. So instead of a giant piece of metal armor, imagine a line of lifeless mannequins in a tailor shop suddenly stepping forward, their blank faces tilting unnervingly, while also other textiles are then going to be your rugs of smothering. Or perhaps the grand hall of an ancient temple is lined with statues of forgotten gods that now move to punish intruders. They will all function mechanically exactly like animated armor, but the visual presentation can shift the tone from classic fantasy to unsettling horror or ancient mystery. Next, let's look at the animated broom. You can use the animated broom for scarecrow limbs or even floating candelabras. A flying broom fits well in a wizard's tower, but what if you're running a gothic horror campaign? The stats could very easily belong to the severed hay-stuffed limbs of a possessed scarecrow, twitching and lashing out at the party, or in a cursed castle, elegant floating candelabras might swirl around the intruders, slamming into them with supernatural force while their flames continue to burn with that eerie blue light. Next, we've got the flying sword. In my introduction, I talked about kitchen knives, but you also could use blacksmith's tools or other types of metal objects. A floating sword is a great idea for a traditional fantasy setting, but in a more grounded or urban campaign, you might use the same stat block for a set of levitating kitchen knives in a cursed inn, or smithing hammers in an abandoned forge that strike as if it's guided by an unseen hand. A particularly gruesome option could be surgical tools in a deranged alchemist's lab, slicing at intruders with eerie precision. These are such versatile tools that we can use in other ways. Lastly, thinking about that rug of smothering. Think about living curtains or even tangling vines. Instead of a rug wrapping around an adventure, imagine heavy velvet curtains in a noble's manor, suddenly twisting like serpents, enveloping their prey. In a more nature-focused campaign, these stats could represent vines animated by druidic magic, ensnaring and crushing anything that strays too close. If you're in an eldritch horror setting, imagine a tapestry that displays a shifting, hypnotic scene that is entrancing and pulling people in closer to look at it, but then suddenly it springs to life and engulfs its victim. These are just a few ideas, but the key takeaway I want you to see is that these animated objects are just a fantastic blank slate for creativity, and with minimal effort, you can make them feel perfectly tailored to your world, whether you're running something whimsical or dark or high magic. Just describe them differently and adjust the sound effects and the movement styles, and then you've got an encounter that feels fresh and unique. Animated objects may seem mundane, but they bring a unique and eerie presence to any campaign. Whether used as clever guardians, comedic hazards, or horrifying encounters, these creatures offer a ton of creative potential for DMs and players alike. So what I'd love to know, what is your favorite way to use animated objects in your game? Let me know in the comments, and let's see how we've spotlit these creatures in our campaigns. If you've enjoyed this Monster Spotlight, be sure to like and subscribe for more D&D creature breakdowns, and stay tuned. I'm making my way through every single creature in the brand new Monster Manual one at a time. So if you've got one that you're really hoping to see, stick around because it's coming.